True. Let's go to Comma Green, we steady on the rise. Digging truth from ancient scenes, we open blinded eyes. Rhyme sharp like pirates' lines, we break the bondage tight. Kamji speaking revolution, keep the fire burning. The drums guide our stride, we march with purpose proud. No more silence, we collide, our voices thunder loud. Politics and history, we stitch them in every verse. From Pharaoh's throne to Yaoundé streets, we claim the Kamji verse.
The Igbo-Ukwu culture proves the Ethiopian migration model. The theoretical framework established by Sheikh Anta Diop is one of the most compelling paradigms developed in African historiography. Diop's fundamental thesis posited the cultural unity of African civilizations emanating from the Happy River Basin. And this was identified as the primary cradle from which the ideas, technologies, and social structures spread across the continent. In the Diop-Obenga historical linguistic model, the pre-dialectical ancestor of Paleo-African or Niger-Egyptian speaking languages would be the Kansiore culture, which existed in the beginning of the Happy River Basin in the Great Lakes region. Now, an analysis of some of the successive cultures that emanated from this pre-dialectical ancestor, such as the Igbo-Ukwu culture of Nigeria, proves the Ethiopian migration model. And this model challenges the prevailing Eurocentric narratives that isolate classical Pharaonic Africa from its African context and denies the extensive pre-colonial interconnections between African civilizations. The discovery of the Igbo-Ukwu archaeological site in southeastern Nigeria in 1938 and its subsequent excavation by Thurston Shaw provides an astonishing evidence that invites a clear, validation of the Ethiopian migration model. The sophisticated bronze artifacts dating to around the 9th century reveal technological sophistication and aesthetic complexity that early archaeologists struggled to explain without reference to external influences. So now we are going to show that the material culture of Igbo-Ukwu absolutely does not represent an isolated development, but provides substantial evidence for an integrated network of African cultures emanating from Ethiopian migration model, specifically from the Happy River Basin, and more specifically from the Great Lakes region and surrounding basins. The analysis of the metallurgical techniques, symbolic systems, trade networks, and ritual practices reveal that this model is definitely validated through the emanation of different West African cultures and civilizations, such as Igbo-Ukwu. So Sheikh Anta Diop's work proposed a radical rethinking of African historical development, centered on the radiation from the Happy River Basin. He highlighted key mechanisms of cultural connections. These were the linguistic affinities between the ancient Kemetic and Inter-African languages, similar theological concepts and cosmological frameworks, as well as parallel geopolitical structures and kingship ideologies. There was also shared technological knowledge in metallurgy, agriculture, and architecture. Diop envisioned a very complex process of transmission and cultural adaptation through which core concepts and technologies were adopted and transformed by a diverse set of African societies that all descended from a common pre-dialectical ancestor from the Happy River Basin. This perspective allows us to understand Igbo-Ukwu not simply as an isolated development, especially within the Greenbergian context, but as an indigenous development that incorporated and transformed ideas that traveled along Saharo-Nilotic trade networks and exchange. When we look at Malvoisin's thesis, and the referencing of the many background materials and natural resources, as well as technological commonalities, identifies very specific equivalencies between Meroitic pottery and West African wares. And this suggests sustained cultural connections in post-Pharaonic Africa. The accidental discovery of bronze artifacts by Isaiah Onozi in 1938, while digging a cistern on his property, initiated one of the most significant archaeological revelations in West Africa. Subsequent excavations by Shaw revealed three primary sites in Igbo Isaiah, Igbo Richard, and Igbo Jonah. The finds included over 700 bronze, copper, and iron objects and approximately 165,000 glass and carnelian beads, and various other artifacts including pottery, textiles, and ivory. The objects displayed a metallurgical sophistication that suggests a long development period, yet no earlier prototypes have been found. The most famous pieces include the vase with rope design, which seamlessly combines at least 8 separate castings, and the intricate double-egg pendant with its complex symbolism. And many of these designs find parallels within Pharaonic Africa, particularly with respect to the vase with rope design and the ancient Saharan roped vase. The archaeological context suggests that Igbo-Ukwu was a ceremonial center of considerable wealth and importance. Igbo Isaiah appears to have been a storehouse for ritual objects, Igbo Richard an elite burial chamber, and Igbo Jonah a disposal pit for ceremonial materials. The elite burial in Igbo Richard contained human remains seated on a wooden stool accompanied by over 100,000 glass beads, preserved textiles, elephant tusks, and bronze regalia. This burial practice shows striking parallels to Happy River Basin traditions of seated burials for important figures like the Nisut. Radiocarbon initially placed these sites in between the 9th and 11th century. Some of the more recent analyses have suggested dates as late as the 13th century. Even with these revised dates, Igbo-Ukwu predates other famous West African bronze traditions, such as those of Ife from the 12th to 15th century and Benin from the 15th to 19th century. This chronological primacy challenges previous narratives about the development of complex societies in West Africa and suggests the need for African-centered models of cultural development. So again, we have the Igbo Isaiah, which is 64 kilograms of bronze and copper objects, 63,000 plus beads and ritual vessels, and this was a storehouse for shrine or ritual ceremonial objects. We have Igbo Richard. This is seated burials, 100,000 plus beads, bronze regalia, and wooden stool. Elite burial, possibly priest, king, or titled persons. And then you have Igbo Jonah, ceremonial pottery, bronze objects, and animal bones. This was likely a ritual disposal pit or an offering site. So one of the most dramatic evidences that connect Igbo-Ukwu to the Happy River Basin in confirmation of the Diopian migration model is the approximately 165,000 beads found at the sites. While chemical analysis shows that some of the beads were produced locally, others originated from great distances, including ancient Kemetic sources. Specifically, some glass and carnelian beads have been traced to workshops in Fustat, Old Cairo, indicating participation in trade networks that extended across the Sahara. The bronze artifacts themselves present something of a mystery. The lost wax casting technique that was used in Pharaonic Africa was also used at Igbo-Ukwu and shows remarkable sophistication, with some scholars suggesting the use of latex rather than beeswax to achieve finer details. Lead isotope analysis has confirmed that the copper used in Igbo-Ukwu bronzes came from local sources, indicating that the technology rather than the raw material was the imported element. This pattern suggests the transfer of knowledge and techniques rather than the mere trade in goods. The iconographic repertoire of Igbo-Ukwu reveals many connections to Happy River Basin symbolism. The frequent appearance of leopard imagery, a symbol of royal power in both ancient Kemet and later West African kingdoms, suggests shared conceptual frameworks. The elaborate double-leg pendant, which some interpret as representing male genitalia and generative power, bears comparison to ancient Kemetic fertility symbols. The ram's head found at Igbo-Ukwu echoes the importance of rams in the Happy River Basin theology, particularly associated with nature like Amun. The technological analysis of Igbo-Ukwu artifacts reveals sophisticated knowledge systems that parallel pharaonic African accomplishments. The intricate bronze working suggests mathematical understanding of geometric patterns and proportions. The calendar system used by the Nri people with its 13-month year based on lunar cycles shows similarities to ancient Kemetic calendar systems. This evidence collectively suggests that the Igbo-Ukwu culture was part of a broader African cultural sphere, rather than an isolated development. So the evidence of long-distance trade at Igbo-Ukwu, you have the glass beads, which over 150,000 quantity have been found, and many of these have been linked to ancient Kemet and traveled and were processed into what is now the Igbo area through Trans-Saharan trade networks. You have carnelian beads. Many of these beads, again, are connected to Kemet, and these are prestige goods, indicated elite trade connections. Then you have bronze and copper objects, right? And though many of the metals were local, the techniques were imported, right? So the sophisticated knowledge most likely came from the Sudanic zone in the north and then traversed down into what is now Nigeria, and particularly the Igbo area. So the ritual complex surrounding Nri kingship provides compelling evidence for cultural connections between the Niger River and Nile Valley regions. The Ezi Nri underwent elaborate installation rituals that included symbolic death and rebirth, journey to obtain sacred clay from the Anambra River, and burial while still alive. These rituals show striking parallels to ancient Kemetic pharaonic installation ceremonies, particularly the concept of ritual death and rebirth during coronation. The religious symbolism of Igbo-Ukwu and Nri culture reveals profound conceptual affinities with Happy River Basin cosmologies. The python symbolism, Eke or Eke Noir, central to Nri tradition, where killing or eating pythons was forbidden, parallels ancient Kemetic reverence for snakes as protective deities. The religious importance of the sacred pot odudu made from clay obtained from specific river sources echoes Happy River Basin tradition. The concepts of divine kingship embodied by the Ezi Nri show sophisticated philosophical parallels to ancient Kemetic rulers. The Ezi Nri was not primarily a political or military leader, but a ritual specialist responsible for maintaining cosmic harmony, cleansing abominations, and ensuring agricultural fertility. This conception of kingship as fundamentally ritual rather than political parallels ancient Kemetic and Nubian models, where the king-ruler served as an intermediary between divine and human realms. The social organization of the Nri society also shows interesting parallels. The practice of granting freedoms to servants who reach Nri territory echoes similar traditions in ancient Kemet regarding temples as places of refuge. The Nri policy of expansion through conversion and ritual oath-taking rather than military conquest represents a unique approach to statecraft that nevertheless finds echoes in how ancient Kemetic cultural influence spread through the adoption of its theological concepts by neighboring societies. And again, the calendar system developed by Nri priests with its precise calculation of lunar months and intercalation of days demonstrates astronomical knowledge comparable to that of ancient Kemetic priests. The Nri ability to accurately predict seasonal changes and determine agricultural cycles suggests sophisticated observation of celestial bodies that form the basis for ritual practices, again paralleling the integration of astronomy, agriculture, and religion in the Nile Valley civilization. So the Sahara has often been misinterpreted as a barrier separating supra-Saharan from infra-Saharan Africa. However, evidence shows that it functioned as a connective corridor, facilitating cultural exchange rather than preventing it. The introduction of the dromedary camel, created new possibilities for trans-Saharan trade, and this coincides with the rise of the Meroitic Kingdom. Archaeological evidence confirms the existence of trade networks contemporary with Igbo-Ukwu, and the discovery of camel and donkey remains from the 1st to 4th centuries AD in the Middle Senegal River provides concrete evidence for early trans-Saharan connections. The remarkable continuity of these trade routes is demonstrated by the later emergence of power Sahelian kingdoms like Ouagadougou that controlled and benefited from these networks. So Malvoisin's model identifies very specific equivalencies between Meroitic pottery, and West African wares, suggesting that artistic conventions and manufacturing techniques were transmitted across the Sahara. This transmission likely involved the movement of specialized artisans or the deliberate training of local craftspeople in foreign techniques. And this speaks to the promulgation of various, Paleo-African technologies across the Saharo-Sahelian zone. The ideological exchange that accompanied material trade is particularly significant for understanding the Diopian model. Again, the adoption of symbols like the ram's head, with its specific association with Amun worship in the Happy River Basin by Igbo-Ukwu elite, suggests not just objects, but entire conceptual frameworks were transmitted and adapted. It also speaks to the reality that the Igbo-Ukwu and the Pharaonic civilization emerged from the same pre-dialectical ancestral root. Along with the migrations of Paleo-African speakers across the African continent, we can consider the following models of cultural exchange. You had elite emulation, with local rulers adopting symbols and practices of the incoming populations. You have artisan mobility, which is specialized craftspeople traveling along trade routes and teaching their techniques. Diplomatic exchange, formal contacts between ritual specialists and political elites, and iconic transmission, the movement of objects carrying symbolic meaning that are reinterpreted. The Nri institution of the Ozo Society provides insight on how specialized knowledge might have been preserved and transmitted over the generations. The Nze na Ozo title holders formed a ritual aristocracy responsible for maintaining cosmological knowledge, historical traditions, and technical expertise. Similar institutions existed in ancient Egypt through priestly colleges dedicated to preserving knowledge. The architectural and urban planning concepts in Igbo-Ukwu and later Igbo societies reflect broader Paleo-African patterns. The layout of ritual spaces, the orientation of shrines, and the organization of ceremonial censers all show conceptual parallels with Nile Valley traditions. The textile evidence from Igbo-Ukwu provides another avenue for understanding cultural connections. Analysis of fabric samples reveal weaving techniques using bast fibers from ficus trees and leaf grass fibers from raffia palms. These materials and techniques show adaptation to local environment while preserving weaving patterns and decorative motifs, showing broader African affinities. The comprehensive analysis of Igbo-Ukwu material culture, ritual practices, and symbolic systems provides compelling evidence supporting the Diopian migration model emanating from the Happy River Basin. Rather than an isolationist development, the Igbo-Ukwu culture appears to have participated and descended from a broader intra-African cultural sphere connected through trade routes and shared cosmological and linguistic frameworks. From the sophisticated bronze casting technology at Igbo-Ukwu, this culture demonstrates knowledge transmission across these trade lines and across these African zones. These West African societies were active participants in adapting and transforming Paleo-African ideas that they received from their ancestors. The spiritual and political institutions of the Nri Kingdom show profound conceptual parallels with the Happy River Basin in ancient Kemet, while remaining distinctively Igbo in their particular descendant manifestations. Igbo-Ukwu flourished during a period when Trans-Saharan trade networks were operational. The presence of beads definitively sourced from Kemetic sources established concrete material cultural links between the Niger and Happy River Basin regions. This directly counters colonial narratives that present African societies as isolated without history. This supports Diop's vision of African unity, acknowledging the creativity and innovation of specific societies like the Igbo-Ukwu. In conclusion, the Igbo-Ukwu archaeological complex, again, provides powerful evidence for the Ethiopian migration model and speaks for the importance of Africana research that's grounded in the revolutionary affirmation and desire of all African people to be liberated from colonial Eurocentric contexts. We support true knowledge, true rigor, the true message of the story of our ancestors, rather than the propaganda from the enemy.
True, let's go to Karma Green, we steady on the rise. Digging truth from ancient scenes, we open blinded eyes. Rhyme sharp like pirates' lines, we break the bondage tight. Kamji speaking revolution, keep the fire burning. Trumpet drums guide our stride, we march with purpose proud. No more silence, we collide, our voices thunder loud. Politics and history, we stitch them in every verse. From Pharaoh's throne to Yaoundé streets, we claim the Kanji verse.